You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello everyone, today I'm joined by Duncan, and I'm delighted because Duncan is one of my favourite people that I see at lots of networking events. Duncan, would you like to tell us about yourself?
It's very kind of you, Ashley. Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Duncan. I am a presentation coach. I help people to speak betterer, I suppose. I'm based up here in the Northeast and loving life.
And you love to craft things. You craft knives, that sounds weird, but I'll let you explain. But you also craft stories, so it's a pretty powerful duo.
Yeah, so making stuff. I suppose I've always been a maker of things. Sometimes when I talk to people, they see a bit of a split in my background. I've got an engineering degree, but I've also done lots of theatre and drama. And that seems, the science and the arts, and maybe people see those as a bit uncomfortable bedfellows, maybe. But actually, I've always loved making things, and now you've said it, you've put the thought in my head. Both of those things are about creating stuff. With engineering, I like building things, I like solving problems, I like fixing things. With theatre, I loved building a show, building a cast, building an atmosphere, building a scene, all of that stuff, and telling a story really well. So now, and I've always had those two elements, right? Those two things, arts and craft, and making physical things, and storytelling, I guess, and people and engagement and theatre have always sat side by side with me. So I've always made things, and now the day job is helping people to do presentations and speeches and talks. And on the side, to keep the making physical things going, I'll see if I can put it better than you did. I hand make kitchen knives for people who would like kitchen knives. Mostly that was because I used to go to holiday cottages or hotels or something, and the knives would always be crap knives that you can try and get an onion and they're awful, and I got really frustrated and thought I can probably do a better job. So I've started making my own, and now sell them to people who fancy one or want a unique present or that kind of thing. So that's the knife making bit, and I don't know if you want to talk about that later, but the presentation training, stories are a huge part of it, and how you create a story and weave a story and take, somebody talking about a new IT infrastructure, and then think about how do you weave that into a story? How do you create a narrative out of that? Both because as human beings, we love stories, we love listening to narratives, we're obsessed with them. And so it creates an engaging presentation, but also, this is a conversation I had with a client this morning. Once you get into the habit of making a talk that has a flow and has a story, it's much easier to remember it. It kind of makes sense like that. So yeah, those two sort of making and crafting of areas sit side by side.
It's really nice to hear more about that and what you do, because I do know that you do speak to people about presentations and you're very cool like that. It's really funny for me looking back. So the first time I met Duncan was at a local networking evening called Inspiration North, which I love. It was LinkedIn local. Mm-hmm. And I actually, you won't know this, but you were one of the first kind of little steps in my head towards starting my own business. And how that happened was, I remember talking to you in the networking before the talk started. I can't even remember who was talking, possibly Joe Darby, one of our fellow entrepreneurs locally. But I remember thinking, who is this guy? Like, he's so young. He's really young, and he's got his own business. And how does he have that confidence? And who does he think he is? And I remember being quite impressed, but also a little bit surprised. And so it started to get my own mind worrying about, well, what skills do I have and what could I do? And I know we've had conversations about how you craft your own narrative. And I think that's a really important point. And I'd like to ask you for yourself, how did you start out? How did you craft a narrative where you got people to come to you and see you as someone who would want to spend and invest in presentation skills and stories?
So some of that is about how did I end up doing this? Well, I've after I finished the degree in engineering, I decided I didn't like maths enough to be a proper engineer, so I went and did a master's in science communication and how to communicate science and some of the problems with that, and that landed me working at the Centre for Life, where we crafted shows and talked about science to public audiences and that kind of thing. And I realised that more and more the thing that really interested me was less and less the science and more how people interact, why people interact. So when it kind of came to the point that I thought about going freelance, I looked back over a decade, and this was the point where I rewrote the story, right? So up until that point, I had done a degree and a master's, and I got a job doing fun sciencey stuff for children, and that was me. That was the story. And when I went freelance, you have that thing at networking, where people go, oh, so what do you do? And you kind of have to have something and introduce yourself. And so I needed to rewrite the story a bit. How did I get here? And with some of that, what is it in telling that story that is going to make people believe in me and trust me? Because at this point, I think when I met you, I'd probably only been going 6 months or something full time. So and this is actually what I did. I looked back over the last decade and realised that continuously since I started doing theatre when I was 12, I've either been acting and telling stories that way, or directing and coaching people and training people to tell to perform a story and thinking about flow and thinking about how lighting can help and all that kind of stuff, or creating shows at the Centre for Life to do exactly the same thing. And training them presenters to do it and to speak to the public and thinking about all of that. So although I go, hi, I'm a presentation coach, I've only been going for a year, and you might go, right, what qualifies him to know what he's talking about? I started telling the story of the fact that for the last decade, I've been pretty obsessed with this. I have a master's degree that touches on it. I have multiple theatre productions to my name. I'm very amateur hour. I'm not a professional theatre person. I took something up to the directed Wind in the Willows at the Edinburgh Fringe, which was great, but I spent a lot of time thinking about that and thinking about how you connect to people, particularly. At the Centre for Life, that was about connect to them so that you can engage them with science, but it was always connect. How do you connect? How do you engage? How do you make people interested? What goes on there? And then, so I crafted this story for myself. I became somebody who has always been obsessed with this. And I found little tidbits from my history that I could use to help emphasize that, or help tell that story. So another science communicator used to introduce me as, hi, this is Duncan. He's a science communicator who doesn't like science. And that was how she introduced me. And so I took that little snippet and went, okay, that's true. Because actually I was always more interested in the communication. And framing that little snippet that way fits better into this new story of Duncan, I guess. Not sure if that's where you wanted to go with that, actually, but it's a really interesting thought. And self-stories, I think, are really important. And lots of people have difficulty when things happen in their lives that challenge their self-story, or they haven't quite worked out what it is and who they are, or if they're telling a story that doesn't really match who they are and who they feel, or who they feel they are, that can become difficult and problematic, particularly when you mix in the stories society tells us we should tell about ourselves as well, and you get a whole kind of mixing pot. So I started telling that story. In terms of my confidence to do it, I've always been a just go for it kind of person, I don't stress about stuff very much. I don't agonize. I don't overthink. That said, I did it sensibly. I'm aware of things like I have a family safety net. I could go home if it all went horribly wrong. I have a partner who earns a decent salary. There's a whole bunch of things that kind of lined up to make it sort of possible and a bit safer. But also it never really occurred to me that I couldn't do it, or that if I tried it and it failed, I wouldn't be fine. There's backup plans, there's plan Bs. I know where to go looking for a job if I need to do that. For the first year, I had a part-time job as well to pick up some hours in the quiet months. So the story of Duncan, weirdly, is a story about someone who can't handle stuff, right? It'll all be fine, and if it's not fine, that's fine.
Well, it's like that saying, it'll all be fine in the end, and if it's not the end. It's that kind of thing.
Exactly that. Yeah.
And also, not everybody has that view or way of thinking or approaching life. I certainly think I'm on your spectrum, and it's so much fun there, but it can be quite frustrating for other people watching, and I'm sure it has been for some of your friends and family, thinking, what are you doing? But you are doing it, and you've done it, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's one of those, some people can't really, well, no, I think you said you're like this. I suspect most entrepreneurs have a bit of that, right? You have to, I saw a talk about entrepreneurism the other day, which said you have to simultaneously be able to deal with it being the best possible thing and the worst possible thing on the same day, right? You have to have a little bit of you that revels in that space. And certainly I think I don't know what the listenership is, but those of us who are small businesses or on our own things tend to seek each other out every now and then, because the other people around us who have gone for, stable incomes and stable jobs don't get it somehow. There's little bits like, the existential crisis being always 2 months away, 3 months away. Okay, after the next 4 months, I have no money. Wherever it is, it's always there. And I think those of us who are starting businesses tend to be drawn to each other because there's someone else there who gets it, and we're cheerful and we're happy and we just march forward and go, yes, it'll be fine. Because if you don't have faith it'll be fine, then the whole thing will defeat you and it's all too much to think about. So you have to, but from the outside that looks like a slightly reckless position sometimes. I don't know whether I've explained it quite well, but it's never felt like a reckless thing. There have been moments where I've been really worried, particularly in the first year, where I've looked ahead and gone, right, I've got a month's worth of money and no more work coming in after that, nothing booked in. And I've had those conversations with my family and with my friends going, what do we do? And so you go, all right, well, ask the question, what do you do? If you hit this point, where do you go and ask for a job? Who are the people you give a ring who might be able to help you? How do you go about that? And then just kind of hold the faith that it'll all be fine. And thus far, touch wood, it has all worked out and is continuing to do so.
It's interesting because I wonder about the power of positivity. A lot of people talk about this, about a growth mindset, about the law of attraction, about optimism and how it has such a key role in helping you to be successful. And sometimes it can feel a little bit like woohoo, woo-woo, is that what they say? Like very new age. But I do see, as you said, like-minded people seeking each other out, and it's really interesting because you just spark with people who have enthusiasm and who get that chaos and that emotional roller coaster that entrepreneurship can be. Some days you feel like you are kicking ass and everything is going great, and then other days it can be really difficult, especially I find if I'm working at home, I can't work from home. I'm so lonely. It doesn't work for me. Yeah. So I've got to be with people. That's where I get my energy. Do you find that you've spotted things about yourself through working on your own and working through stuff?
Oh, totally. So I went from working in an office, and a really amazing office with a great team, who, we chatted all the time. It wasn't, sometimes we'd have our heads down, but we could bounce ideas off each other and chat and talk. And there was always that spark and that energy to keep you going, to working completely solo. So I can do about 2 to 3 days at home before I go, I need to get out. And then I go to a coffee shop or a co-working space or something like that. But yeah, so I need that. I need some injection of people every now and then. But I think one of the things, I've always had this streak, but I think it's got worse since I've been on my own, is I have a sort of need for affirmation. I have to be told that I'm doing good stuff every now and then. And actually that doesn't manifest itself for the presentation training, because that kind of works and that's good. But the knife maker, my partner, when she listens to this, will absolutely laugh, because whenever I've made something new and she comes home, I'm desperate to show it off. I'm desperate to go, look what I did a thing, isn't it nice? Give me a pat on the back, tell me it's a lovely thing, right? And she rolls her eyes and couldn't care less, right? Well, no, she likes them, but yeah, it's not her thing. And yeah, and I've always had this. I've always had a sort of show-off bit of me, I think. I like having that affirmation, but I think it's got a bit worse since I've been on my own. Again, possibly because you're not surrounded by people, you don't constantly have that, oh, that's a nice idea, let's think about this, let's chat about that, all those sorts of things. So I have to watch out for that slightly, because if you do it too much, it's definitely obnoxious. So I've spotted that about myself. Other things, I work really well when I've got a schedule, but I can't make myself stick to a tight schedule for more than about 2 weeks at a time, and then it all goes to pot. And rather than fight to that, I've just started to embrace it. Right, I'll go, right, sit down, right, schedule the 2 weeks, and then we work like that, and I feel really good and happy, and then accept that I'm going to have a week where I just have to make it all up, and everything gets a little bit more stressful because I don't know what I'm doing, and then get back into it. So interesting things like that have come through.
It's great that you've shared that. I'm laughing to myself about the affirmation element, because I see a lot of myself in that, actually. I think the thing is, in a workplace where you have an organisation, you have someone working with you and looking over you, you would always have a boss usually.
Yeah.
But when you are the boss, you are the affirmation. You have to speak to yourself in a way that's going to motivate you and hold you to account and be responsible and stick to the structure. And when you're creative as well, sticking to structures can be a bit sticky anyway.
Yes,
it can be
absolutely
hard. So I'm definitely resonating with a lot of what you're saying, and it's making me smile too. I'd love to tell listeners, I'd love you to tell listeners about 2-Minute Tip Jar, which is a great initiative that you have been doing, and I believe it's now finished. Is that right? It has
finished. I've pulled it, stop before everyone gets bored kind of idea. So 2-Minute Tip Jar, again, when I started out, everyone was saying, you have to do social media and you have to be creating content and making stuff, and video is really big now, so make some video. I was like, oh, okay, I'll do some video. And I speak, people seem to be drawn to the way I speak and the way I communicate, so video is a natural medium for me. And I tried a whole bunch of stuff and hated it. I've got a whole bunch of little videos on my laptop that I will never show the world because they're awful. And I sat down one afternoon and was trying to think about, how do I do this? What do I do? And it was chatting to Ian Farrar, who's a local kind of entrepreneur who supports lots of businesses and fellow podcaster. And he told, I said, what do I put out there? And he said, put it all out. Put the best stuff out. And I went, okay. And so I did it, and I found a little conceit. I really liked the idea that I could improvise, basically. So one of the problems I found with making videos was it was taking me ages to film a thing and get it right and edit it and cut it and try again and take after take after take after take for what is 2 minutes of social media video. I'm quite good at improvising, so I thought what I'll do is I'll take a whole bunch of tips, and every week I'll just improvise one. I'll pick one and read it and improvise it. And that's what the 2-Minute Tip Jar is. It's a mason jar full of tips, presentation tips, things like how to use your voice, or how to walk around the stage, or how to make a PowerPoint slide. And I pull one out at a time and deliver it for 2 minutes, and then I'm done. And it's been really good for me. They say consistency is key for social media stuff. I did one a week. I have the 52, so there's one a week for a year now, and that's why I'm killing it. But there will be more stuff coming in. In fact, if you listen to this podcast, I think I'm going to do a questions-based one, so get people to ask me questions that I then attempt to answer. So if you listen to this and you have a presentation-based question, or I don't know, it's a question about me that you'd like to know more, write to me, send it to me, and I'll add it to the, I don't know, whatever it's going to be, tip, question, hat thing. Not sure yet. No, still creating it, but yeah.
Well, we don't have to know all the answers now, but it's exciting to know that you've got something new coming.
Yes,
and if people were to contact you, would you like them to do that on LinkedIn or Twitter?
Either. So I'm pretty active on both, slightly different active on both, because they're slightly different audiences. My audience on Twitter is got quite a lot of academia, and that science communication side is still there. Some of the business people are there now as well. But in LinkedIn, it's very much a business audience, whichever suits you. Or email me. You can find my email on the website.
Cool. Thank you. I'd like to know, Duncan, so we actually had met before and all this kind of thing, but we also met again when you did TEDx Newcastle University and you were a speaker there. So how was that for you?
Fantastic. It was scary. It was brilliant. It was scary. One of the things I get asked a lot whether I get nervous, because obviously I speak all of the time. And I used that TEDx as an example of a time when I was really had to walk the talk in terms of doing the nerve management techniques I train people to do. So I was, Ashleigh very kindly asked me to close. So I was last. There was a whole day of speakers. Even in my little bit, there was 3 speakers, I think, before me. So I had a good hour to sit and just wait with nothing to do, but wait before my talk. And the nerves were kicking in. And so I had to kind of, I'm not sure I really paid much attention to the talk before me, because I was so trying so hard to manage my own focus and my own nerves and not let the panic run away from me, because it was quite a big deal. It's a TEDx talk. It was, but then when I was up there, it was really good fun, and people have said some very lovely things, and I've had people contact me who I've never met or heard of before, who've watched it, who resonated with it and wanted to say something. So that's been really, really good.
What I loved about it was, for me, in terms of the content, it was the most kooky presentation. I just thought it was fantastic. So Duncan spoke about how to speak and how to have powerful presentations, but it was all about open sesame, right?
It was all about open sesame. It was all stories. So I wanted to talk about stories, and I wanted to make, it's TEDx, so I wanted to make a big point. And one of the things I love about stories is the way they can unite people. And they unite particularly stories that are about kind of the human condition and what it's like to be a human being on this earth, and the stuff that resonates across all of us. And I sort of started thinking about stories that have stood the test of time, right? Stories that have crossed cultures and crossed almost civilizations. And I remember I have a storybook of Aladdin that my mum gave to me, I think, when I was very small. I remember reading that as a child, and so I went back to Aladdin, and then from there to the rest of the 1001 Nights, or the Arabian Nights as they're sometimes called, which are a collection of myths, folk tales, stories from the Middle East, and and they're really old. So I wanted to talk about storytelling and tell the story of some of the Arabian Nights stories. They're also, the structure of them is really interesting. They're kind of nested, they're stories inside stories inside stories. And talk about that and the way that it has lasted. It's lasted hundreds, thousands of years and travelled across the world. Everybody knows Aladdin. Everybody knows the concept of the genie. Everybody knows Scheherazad's story, and the 1001 Nights are very common, and you find traces of them in more modern storytelling as well, all over the place. And I was just really interested in that, so that felt like a thing to talk about. And it's something I don't get to talk about very often, is that kind of much deeper dive into stories and why I love them, why I think they're great as presentation tools, because people respond to them, people resonate with them. It draws us all together in a shared experience. And so I took the opportunity to do that, and it was really good fun.
It was definitely good fun to watch. Can I ask, Duncan, what would the world be like if there was no space for curiosity for you?
Oh, awful. Boring. Curiosity is an incredibly powerful, wonderful thing. We talked about personal story, internal personal story. Trying to rekindle and keep alive curiosity is one of the things I actively try and do. But it's, human beings have this extraordinary want to look around the next corner. And I don't know whether that's evolutionary or whatever, but if you look at children, they love exploring, they love finding new places, opening doors, being curious. What's inside here? What does this do? What happens if I do this? And working at the Science Centre, I saw an awful lot of that, and it was one of the behaviours we were really trying to encourage in people who came to us. And I've tried to hang on to that and keep that going, because I love learning things. I love learning new skills. The knife making was part of that. It was, I'm going to teach myself. I'm going to learn to do this. When you stop being at school or university or whatever, some of the learning stops, and it can be harder to find new things to learn that keep you excited and keep you interested. And finding stuff out is, fundamentally for me, really exciting and really interesting. So, but also it drives people to do things. So a world without curiosity, I think, would be worse. the desire to, that's what science is fundamentally, is poke a thing and see what happens. And you need to moderate it. Sometimes it's not always worth poking the thing because what happens is terrible. But the whole concept is, can we make food better for people to eat? Can we do this? Can we improve things? Can we try stuff? What happens if we smash these two molecules together? Can we fly to space? Let's go to, what's Mars like? Let's go and find out, right? Asking these sorts of questions, I think, is very exciting and pushes us. But even in business, are there different ways to do business? Can we throw off some of the things we don't like about the way business is done traditionally? Can we have a look at how business interacts with society and do something a bit different there? This continual striving to do something different, to find something new, to push buttons, to walk your own path and tell your own story, that for me is curiosity. And if we didn't have it, a lot of things would slow down, would maybe become a whole bunch more uniform, and we'd lose some of the richness, I think, of life.
Thank you. That was very interesting to hear. Actually, it was lovely to hear you bounce around on different ideas and how excited and enthusiastic and passionate you get. I would like to know, has there ever been a time when something hasn't quite worked out for you? Maybe something's gone wrong, or you had great ambitions and it didn't quite work? And how did you cope with that?
Yeah, so immediately prior to setting up this business, I was part of a kind of classic Dragon's Den entrepreneurial scheme. We had angel investment and that kind of thing. We had some patents. We were inventing a thing. This bit, I can't tell you more about it than that. But that was my step between full-time employment and full-time working for myself. And it was with a business with 4 others. But I was kind of the sole person doing a lot of the work at that point. And yeah, and it was tough. We had all these grand ideas and grand things, and whenever you come up with an invention business, you're going to invent a thing and make millions and become a new. I said many entrepreneurs probably resonate with that idea that you start out thinking it's going to be really easy and it's going to be quick and it's going to work. And I'm actually really glad that I had a different business to learn the lessons that no, it's not. It's not going to be quick. It's not going to happen fast. The things that slow it down aren't the things you think. So people often think that it's because of a lack of money or various other things. And, in my case, and I suspect in some others, actually it's a lack of motivation almost. A thing runs on so long that the excitement stops happening and it becomes really hard to keep pushing it forward. So I'm really, it's still ticking along in the background and we'll see where it goes. But my focus now is this business. But I'm glad that I learned some of those lessons about it doesn't go the way lots of people say it does. The stories we hear about business and hear about entrepreneurship are the success stories. They're, YouTube selling to Google for $1 billion after 10 weeks or whatever it was, right? It's the quick fixes and the thing. We don't necessarily hear about the thousands of other businesses that have built themselves slowly, who've taken their time, who've done it carefully, who've done it safely, who haven't bet the house on things, and have actually built really good, successful businesses that are valued by their customers and help people and do stuff, but just take longer. And I'm glad I learned those lessons. And in fact, that's part of, the self-story of who I am, is that I hate all of the, get up at 6 a.m. in the morning and send a gazillion emails and then have multiple meetings and no, I want to enjoy the journey. Hey, if it means I'm a millionaire in 10 years rather than 3, then so be it.
It's a good point, actually. I know we've spoken about this at length, the hustle culture, and it's something that makes me laugh so much because a lot of people will say to me, how do you fit so much in, Ash? And I am a busy person.
You are.
But so is everyone else. We all have a lot of time in the day, and actually, I don't have a TV, so that helps a lot as well. But what I was going to say is this hustle culture really does, it makes me laugh sometimes because, you can only do so much. And we all have different priorities, right? So the way I take the view is anybody can do whatever works for them. Just do you be authentic. Some days you're going to have all your stuff, going well, and other times it's not. But it does make me laugh that the people that are always up at like 4 a.m. to hit the gym, to do all the hundreds of meetings, I really like the idea of being more productive in the time that you have. So if you're going to have a meeting, make it worthwhile. So it's not just talking about the same thing. I've actually stopped going for coffee with people. I love coffee, by the way, but I don't know if you found this as well, but as a new entrepreneur, there's a lot of let's have coffee, let's grab coffee.
So much.
And it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, when I started, that was happening all the time. And I was instigating a lot of it all the time. And I guess like you, I'm now much more precious over my time. Sometimes I'll deliberately use going for a coffee as a timeout. You know, as I said, you know, I can do 2-3 days in the house by myself. So if I've then got go for coffee with Ashleigh, say, that'll be lovely. And it may, and again, there's this slow, you know, I don't need a coffee to turn into business that day. That's fine. But I have to have some thought or realistic expectation that this is a person it's worth getting to know better. Before I'll kind of commit to those sorts of things. And I've just embraced this. Do you know the story of the tortoise and the hare? I
do, but why didn't you tell everyone else?
So it's a English, I think, folk story, or is it one of Aesop's fables? I can't remember. Anyway, there's a hare and a tortoise, and the hare says to the tortoise, "I will challenge you to a race," thinking, I'm going to win. I'm a very long-legged, very fast hare. This will be easy. And the tortoise says, "Yeah, all right, we'll have a race." And so they settle down, ready to go on the start line. Boom, and off they go. And the hare races off into the distance, dust cloud in the back. The tortoise takes its first, I don't know why I'm doing actions, you can't see my actions, first slow steps into the race. And the hare ends up miles ahead, but a bit knacked because they've expended all of their energy. And so they have a nap. And everybody knows, right, that a nap, that 2-minute nap, is never a 2-minute nap. A 2-minute nap is at least a 2-hour nap. And you can't just kind of close your eyes and have a snooze. If you're working at that, if you're used to working at that pace, it kind of builds up. And so the tortoise passes the hare while they're asleep and ends up winning the race. And I think this is my approach to business, to marketing, and actually to life. You know, don't rush to get places. Very much I'm with you. You be you. Different things work for different people. This is the thing that I've found. Make sure I prioritize the other stuff, you know, spending time at home, making things, whether it's knives or something else, learning new stuff, going out and walking on the beach, stuff that makes me happy, cooking, right? I can prioritize that because my concept of how I'm doing the business is it's a tortoise. And that means do social media. It won't pay you back instantly, but it builds, and it builds slowly. Do networking. You might not meet somebody today or tomorrow, but they might remember you in a week's time or whatever, and you make connections and you build that presence slowly. And I think for me and for the way my business works, that has been okay, and that's worked, and it's enabled me to keep this balance. Sometimes I'm worried I'm not working hard enough, and then my partner will poke me and go, "If you don't think you're working hard enough, maybe do some more work." But at the same time, it means that there's always time to do a walk on the beach, or ring your parents, or the other stuff that is important in life for me. That's I don't know. I've done quite a lot of thinking about that over. It was after Startup Week last year. Some of the talks there got me thinking. You know, what sort of a business do I want to be? How do I want this to go? And I very much want to enjoy the journey, as well as the end result, however, whatever it is, but getting there matters, how we get there. And I don't want to end up spending years working really hard and pushing and being miserable and missing stuff, right? Missing some of the joy of life on the way.
Absolutely. And for me as well, it's about who you take with you on the way, you know, surrounding yourself with the like-minded people that we were talking about, that you seek out naturally, that you click with. You know, that's the best part of the journey, is the cool collaborations you get to do together. Things like this, for example, are super fun. So yes, it is nice. It's nice to slow it down and do more things more meaningfully. So I'd like to know, is there anything you've read or listened to that for you has sparked your curiosity or creativity, or helped you in your life?
Oh.
Is it Aladdin's Tales?
Oh, so there's so many things. I'm going to go more recent than Aladdin's Tales, actually, into to another podcast that is. I've only discovered podcasts recently, but I absolutely love the No Such Thing as a Fish podcast, which is just silly facts. Basically, it's the QI podcast, and that's really good. It distracts my brain sometimes when I need my brain distracted onto something else. In terms of kind of work, when I started the business, there was I listened to one of Seth Godin's podcasts. I think it's called The Startup School or something, and it wasn't a podcast in the traditional sense. It's a live recording of a 3-day workshop he ran, and a whole bunch of stuff in there was really useful. But the thing that keeps coming back to me is do the hard stuff today. The thing that you're putting off, the thing that you don't really want to do, and you keep dropping down your to-do list, and particularly if it's phone someone, do it right now. Pick up the phone, do it. I've applied that to business, and it's been really good to make sure that stuff gets done, because if you leave things undone, they tend to get in your head, they become worse and worse and worse, and then you don't do it. But also in my personal life, ring your granny. It's a thing I put off, and I don't know if other people out there do, and maybe I'm a bad person for doing so. Some people are much nicer to their grannies. But if you do it, just do it. And it was lovely to do, and great to have that conversation and connect, and go to that networking meeting. Just do it. Meet people. Answer that email. Make a decision about how much you're going to charge people. A lot of the stress for me comes in not having made decisions. As soon as I've made a decision, everything's great. Regardless of where that decision takes me, once the decision's made, that's a much happier place to be. And I learned that through Seth Godin, but it's something that actually works in life as much as it does in business. Make decisions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm with you there. I totally agree. Okay, so we are run out of time now, but I would love to know, what is your number one word that helps you to nurture your zest?
Peace.
Wow, that is not a word I was expecting. Could you explain?
It's not a word that I thought was going to come into my head, and I nearly second-guessed myself and gave you something else like enthusiasm or passion or things like that, which I do think are massively important, but peace came into my head because I have identified things I can do, like meditation or noticing small things like the colour of the leaves, or places I can be, like outside or on the beach or whatever, that give me a sense of peace. And I've been quite strict with training myself to spend just when that moment happens, spend a couple of seconds inside that moment. Just shut out everything else and spend some time there. And that has allowed me to regain perspective. It allows me to recharge. It allows me to shrug off any negative stuff I've been carrying around with me, just to go take a moment in the peace, take a breath. This is it. This is what it's about, finding these moments. And sometimes they are in the midst of bustle and excitement and passion. If I'm working with a team and everything's going really well, or I'm doing a training session and they're having a really good time and stuff's going fantastically, I can find a second, I can step back and just observe a bit neutrally and find a second of peace to see the world that I've helped build and the people around me who are happy and having a good time. If I've got a group of friends at the pub, every now and then I'll just observe and see how happy and friendly everyone is. And so for that, creating and treasuring and finding those moments of peace allows me to continue to nurture my zest.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's really powerful. And thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.